lovers. Welcome to another episode of the Doomloop Dispatch, the show covering the worst parts of the San Francisco Bay Area. I'm Kevin L. Jones. Scott isn't with me because we're just doing a quick intro. This is actually just kind of a filler episode. We just did 2 interviews with Ami Chien Mills on her show Moment of Truth, which is on KSQD out of Santta Cruz / Monterey. And I just wanted to share them because we got a lot of good stuff in. It was just some really great conversations. We just wanted to get something up anyways because our next new episode is going to be a little late. We are going to be speaking with Brandy Markman of the San Francisco Education Alliance about the possible school closures in San Francisco and all the mess there, especially the coup where they took out the school board president and replaced her with a charter school administrator who's also a twice failed school board candidate named Phil Kim. Nobody's happy about it. It's clear it's just they're gonna go forward with closing these schools no matter what. And so that's gonna be a great conversation. But before then, Scott and I talked with Ami about the Techie Takeover in San Francisco, the network state, and got into YIMBYism and everything else. It's 2 episodes that are put together into one, so it's really long. I hope that's okay. It's just makes it easier for you guys, and I hope you enjoy it. Remember to like and subscribe on YouTube. Follow me on all the social media sites. We're on Instagram, X, or Twitter. Let's call it Twitter. And we're on Patreon, so support us, please. We could use all the help. Oh, and I'm on TikTok. Those have been doing really well. Please follow us on TikTok because I do a lot of little news briefs that I used to do for episodes. Now I save them for TikTok. So if you want those little bits about what's going on in the news and my thoughts and background, please check it in there. Anyways, here are our interviews with Ami Chien Mills. Thanks.
Welcome to Moment of Truth with Ami Chien Mills. That's me. Our show today, Sad Francisco. How the tech bros behind J.D. Vance and Donald Trump are attempting a Bay Area and national coup. First, we want to give credit to the podcast Sad Francisco and its host Toshio Marinek, from who we are stealing this episode title. Please subscribe to that podcast to learn more about everything we talk about this evening. With us this evening, we have a Bay Area journalist of many years, also a podcaster who has been tracking the tech bros and venture capital fund executives who live in and around the traditionally left-leaning city of San Francisco. He and his co-host have researched how these tech execs have been putting their particularly heavy thumbs on the scales of democracy in our beautiful Baghdad by the Bay, in other Bay Area cities, and now across the entire nation. With the selection of Ohio Senator J.D. Vance as Trump's VP pick, new levels of scrutiny are upon major Vance supporter Peter Thiel, the founder of PayPal and Palantir, and his tech bro network of VC capitalists, many of whom have laser-focused their political designs on and around our beautiful Bay Area, and in particular, San Francisco, traditionally known as a hotbed of LGBTQ plus activism and progressive politics. The Moment of Truth team first started covering political upheavals in San Francisco for Talk of the Bay when we interviewed recalled San Francisco School Board member Allie Collins, who was deposed with 2 progressive colleagues by a bizarre conglomeration of tech executives, out-of-towners who had just moved to the city, YIMBY or Yes in My Backyard supporters, and back-channel affiliates of the Christo-fascist group Moms for Liberty, which we have also covered extensively on past shows. I will link to these past episodes in our show notes. While claiming a moderate, centrist, or even progressive mantle, these tech bros have made significant inroads in San Francisco politics, including funding the recall of progressive DA Chesa Boudin. Now, many of them are going all in on MAGA, Vance, and Trump. So here's the question. What do these tech bros and bazillionaires want from San Francisco and the nation? Kevin L. Jones is a multimedia journalist and audio producer who's worked at some of the most notable news outlets in the Bay Area, including the San Francisco Chronicle, KQED, and KTVU for 2 decades now. He currently hosts the leftist news show and podcast Doomloop Dispatch with D. Scott Miller. Welcome, Kevin.
Hey there. Thank you for having me.
You sound loud and clear, so that's a wonderful thing. And then we also have D. Scott Miller, I believe, joining us by phone. Are you there?
Yes, I am. How you doing?
I'm doing good. We didn't have a bio for you, so do you want to share a little bit about your background?
Yeah, I'm the former managing editor of the East Bay Express, the Oakland alternative paper. I'm also a former contributing writer for the San Francisco Bay Guardian, San Francisco Weekly, and I'm leaving one out.
Wow.
I'm also a contributing columnist in the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. And so, yeah, I'm just a writer.
Yeah, not just.
And we should give him credit, too. He did coin the term Afro-surrealism with a very famous essay.
There you go.
Yes, I did.
I mean, hey, alternative media, that's how I came up in this journalism world myself. And in fact, I used to work for Metro, which I believe bought the East Bay Express. Is that right?
Yes, they did. Yes, they did.
And when did they do that? Because I just was talking to an editor there, and I saw on her email that they had like 9 different. I was like, wait a second, the East Bay Express. When did that happen?
That happened during the pandemic. Actually, it happened in 2020.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'd love to hear your opinion on that, but we'll save it to see if we have time at the end of the show. Because one of the things we want to cover is how the news media has been covering or not covering what's been happening in San Francisco. And what I'd like to do is lay out the background for our listeners, and I'm hoping the two of you can do that. I mean, we've covered this a little bit, as you heard, with, the interview with Allie Collins, which was when I first was like, wait a second, what's going on in San Francisco? This is weird, right? But let me just say to our listeners that let's start from almost the end, which is that J.D. Vance is our vice presidential pick along with Donald Trump on that ticket. And J.D. Vance was supported to the tune of $15 million in his senatorial race in the state of Ohio. That was more money from Peter Thiel than J.D. Vance raised on his own in his own PAC. So you could almost say that Thiel is why Vance became senator, and Thiel is probably also why Vance became the Trump VP. And that's how significant these tech executives that live in and near San Francisco are. So let's go ahead and start with you, Kevin Jones. You've been tracking politics for a long time in San Francisco, and I, the first thing that I heard about actually was the school board recall, because we're down here in Santta Cruz, which is a little further away. We like to pretend that we're not sometimes a part of the United States at all. We have
good reason.
We have protection of the mountains, the ocean, and we feel like we're in this little idyllic, paradise. But actually, it's not true. We have a lot of the same issues, which we're going to get into and ask you about. But if you could talk about what you first noticed, and then how, if you want to summarize what you think the situation is.
Well, yeah, it was definitely the school board recalls for sure, because it was out of nowhere. It was during the pandemic, and it was over stuff that was basically acceptable the previous year. That they were waiting for the vaccines. They're not opening schools. So why don't we work on these other things that are on the agenda, like renaming schools, which is something residents wanted, and former school board member, I believe also supervisor Matt Haney pushed for.
Right.
Let's get these names changes,
Right.
But the right jumped on that, especially when they had Well, it was a Lincoln school and a George Washington school. Oh, what, do you hate America now because you want to change the names? I mean, but it was literally just right-wing meat that kind of kicked off all this scrutiny. And then you could see it happening with Siva Raj and Adam Lujan coming in and basically being the face of the school board recall, even though they had basically just enrolled their schools that December.
You mean just enrolled their kids in the schools? They had just come from, I think, Canada or something?
Or no, I think just kind of up the way. I think they were Livermore, if I remember right.
Okay.
But really, literally just nothing to do with the school board. And suddenly, not only are they, getting their kids into school and angry about it because they, of course, like everyone else, are having online classes.
Right.
But they're now the face of the recall. And first thing they do, go on and talk to Glenn Beck. That famous left-wing Bay Area journalist.
Bastion of repute. Yeah.
You also can't leave out Diane Yap.
Yeah. Friends of
Diane
Lowell.
Yap
Yeah.
And Friends of Lowell. And the thing that's interesting about Diane Yap is that she came in connected with the Manhattan Institute, which ended up being something that it continues to become a factor in everything we're seeing here. I like Diane Yap in a lot of ways was their kind of like connection into a much larger network of this network state that we're about to talk about. So I just want to tap into that. And if you actually take a look at Diane Yap's Twitter page, it's at Real Diane Yap. Yeah. Now all she does is racist, white supremacist stuff on her Twitter page. But at the time, everybody kind of accepted her as like a normal, not weird, not racist person.
Right.
I just wanted to add that.
Just a Chinese parent. I mean, as a Chinese person myself, she's like the bane of my existence. But so she. Well, what I heard from Allie Collins and Diane Yap with Friends of Lowell, basically like president of that organization. And for people who don't know San Francisco, which is a lot of our listeners, just to keep that in mind. That's a school in San Francisco that's part of the public school system funded by taxpayers, but was merit-based in terms of getting in, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And so a lot of parents who had their kids there did not want what the school board was proposing to make it just sort of more equitable, getting into Lowell School.
A lottery system instead of testing.
Yeah. And we have that here actually for our school that's sort of like that. And it's still, it's a good school, and it's also just based on a lottery, frankly. Mm-hmm. So it's not such a radical idea. And then I also heard Allie Collins say that the mailing address for the Friends of Lowell, this sort of like, we're just concerned parents, wanting to make sure our kids go to a good school, whatever. The mailing address was the same mailing address as Moms for Liberty.
Yep.
Which is crazy.
Absolutely. That's true. That's true.
Exactly. And it's all kind of coordinated by these bigger networks and stuff. Emily Mills, who everyone should follow on X, a.k.a. Twitter, SF Mills, she points out all this stuff all the time. It does, you feel like it does delve into the conspiratorial, but she's got the receipts, and she's showing how all these people are kind of working together with like the Napa Institute the Manhattan Institute. All these institutes are kind of working together. And we should also
Heritage Foundation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And we should point out, too, another aspect of this going on at the same time. Well, you have this kind of low backlash because it was made very much about race. The whole reason for switching to the lottery system is because the school just was not diverse. It was not, you could see it. It was like, in terms of Latino and black students, much lower in comparison to Asian and white students.
Yeah.
But they made that be like, like that's going to bring the school down, which is obviously a racist statement. But at that same time, so they're pushing that. At that same time, you had the Boudin recall. So San Francisco District Attorney Chesa Boudin had just came in. Now he was the child of former you're definitely bigger than activists. You could almost say, well, they were weathermen. Let's just say that they were weathermen.
Yeah.
If you know anything about the history of the weathermen,
Yeah.
and he was very much about. Less incarceration, holding bad cops accountable, and not pursuing drug charges and trying to decrease the amount of people being incarcerated. But that's another thing that especially the local police unions didn't like. So there was almost this kind of coalition that started that was actually really tapping into the Chinese demographic in San Francisco, because while Boudin was in office, there was a death where basically a guy was speeding through an intersection and hit a senior Chinese woman and killed her. And it was made like, well, why was he out? Oh, Boudin let him out. Oh, that's, it's because he doesn't keep Asian people safe. And so, you have this whole kind of growing angry demographic that they tapped into that really pushed through the recalls.
Yeah.
There's a lot that, because at that same time too, with not only the backlash against the Lowell change, you also had these accounts popping up like the Asian Crime Report, and I'm trying to remember the name of the campaign, but it was very much about kind of making it like, oh, these people don't care about our Asian residents and are letting them get killed and beat up and everything, getting attacked on the streets.
Yeah.
But then when you scratch the surface and you see the kind of things they shared, they're also very anti-black and very racist, just like Diane Yap.
Right. I mean, it sort of felt like sort of all these outside influences started to come in, along with the more conservative, libertarian, sort of far-right tech money. We need to take a short break. You're listening to KSQD 90.7, 89.7, and 89.5 FM in the Santa Cruz and Monterey Bay Area, Prunedale, and the Central Coast. Welcome back to Moment of Truth with Ami Chien Mills. We are talking to two journalists, amazing journalists, award-winning journalists, both from the mainstream media in San Francisco and around the Bay Area, and also the alternative news media, Kevin Jones and D. Scott Miller, who've been covering the weird shift in the winds in San Francisco and also now affecting Oakland, where some of these same sort of billionaire folks are trying to, I was just listening to your last podcast on Oakland and trying to recall now the mayor of Oakland, who is the first Hmong mayor, I think, in the United States, practically. And also the DA, who is a black woman. Is that right? Did I get that right?
Yes.
Yeah, she's also the first black woman DA of Oakland, California.
Right. And so they're also trying to do this during a special election, y'all were saying. And so this seems to be a tactic, is to come in and I guess, and use special elections where there's very low turnout. People are conservative, generally speaking. It's more conservative people who come out and far fewer people who come out to special elections. These cost a lot of money. And so there's this whole kind of campaign. And as you guys are saying, Manhattan Institute is involved. People behind Moms for Liberty are somehow connected to people in San Francisco. And then also these tech executives. And I want you guys to talk, if it's okay, about Gary Tan and Balaji Srinivasan. I hope I'm saying that right. That's how I say it. I've heard different versions. And the network state. So, Kevin, let's start with you, and then we'll go to D. Scott.
Yeah, well, basically the network state is first a book by Balaji Srinivasan.
And he's a tech venture capitalist, yeah?
Yeah, okay. Yeah. I'm trying to remember what his big payoff was. But he was a partner with Andreessen Horowitz, one of those big investment firms.
Yeah, both of whom are funding Trump, I believe, and supporting Trump Vance.
These are the guys like Peter Thiel who think democracy impedes their rights. It's that kind of thing where they feel, well, I want to do this. You can't stop me, and you shouldn't stop me. And a big part of it is, so they basically kind of want to create an elitist society for themselves. Gil Duran has done a lot of amazing reporting on this. I highly recommend reading up on his article, especially there's one in the the New Republic, called the Tech Barons, seeking to purge San Francisco of blues. And that's a big part of it too, is that a lot of this new techie money that came in, and remember, they all came in very recently. They are all kind of rushed in after the Twitter tax break from San Francisco Mayor Ed Lee. Basically, once, this kind of open ticket, they opened the gates to come on in and because we want your money and we don't care like who's already here. And so a lot of these guys came in and they just started having their way, throwing money at stuff. Citizen United, it's legacy in full force.
Yeah.
And a big part of it is they want to cut out left and progressive politicians, activists, everyone. Anyone that they see as not holding to their center, because they call themselves moderates, is the craziest part.
I know, and sometimes they call themselves Democrats, or centrists or something, and they're allied with YIMBY. I want to talk about that too, but go ahead.
Yes, and it is kind of crazy seeing the people that they're running on the Democratic ticket, like one guy, Trevor Chandler, who claims to be a substitute teacher and lifelong Democrat, but it turns out he was voting for Republicans as far back as definitely he helped on McCain's campaign. And I don't think he voted for Trump, though. I think that was his last thing. But he was also for a long time an AIPAC lobbyist. So that should tell you everything. But anyways, going back to the network stake, they want to set up a separate thing where they basically cut out anyone that's on too much on the left of them. And that's basically, if you have a heart, you might be too much on the left for these guys. And they literally, they talk about, like, Balaji as on his podcast is like fawned over this beautiful idea of a world where basically the grays, as they call them, he separates everyone into three colors: blues, grays, and reds. Reds on the right, blues on the left. The grays are the techie elites. But basically, and he pitches a world like in some place in San Francisco where basically the cops and the grays and the reds basically pick on the blues and push the blues out of all regular life. He's very clear about it. Like, he wants to have parades showing off military might and celebrating tech and business and that kind of stuff. Not, gay pride, nothing like that.
Tech pride.
Tech pride, fascist pride. Let's be real about it. It's very scary stuff. People talk about Project 2025 being scary, which it is. It's going to be scary, a taking away of people's rights. But that's exactly what the network state wants to do. If you care about the poor, the hungry, the homeless, these are the people that are pushing for the homeless sweeps. They want the homeless. They want Mayor Breed to basically have no quorum, no caring at all for the people that truly just can't afford to live in the city. They have jobs in the city, but they just can't afford a home, so they're living in a tent. They found that out. They want to push this idea that all homeless are drug users, can't get their life together. No. 90% have full-time jobs. It's just that the rent
in San Francisco?
In San Francisco.
Wow. Yes. That's a lot. Ours is like, I think 30% have full-time jobs down here.
Yeah. It's the majority of them because it's just so expensive. You have to pay $3,000 for a one-bedroom.
Yeah, and that probably includes couch surfing. Okay, so I want to just pause for a moment and say that Nyanko Nyasu, who's on our Moment of Truth team, said that he thinks Balaji got this idea from Star Trek, from a Star Trek episode where, I don't know if you guys ever saw this. And so people think Balaji is crazy, right? Like I've talked to people in our community and people who are in the media and so forth. They're like, oh, but who cares? Because Balaji is, he's nuts and no one really pays attention. So I'm going to go to D. Scott for a moment. D. Scott Miller, also a reporter in the Bay Area. Can you tell, Peter Thiel is a huge player in our national politics now. And I don't think, between him and Gary Tan, it seems like they have a lot of shared philosophy. Is that true?
I actually approach it differently because I used to write for Gawker.
For which one? Sorry.
Gawker. I used to write for Gawker.com. And the first time I ever heard Pete Field's name is he was the guy that took down Gawker. He took my job away from me, basically, over a weird ass Hulk Hogan comment that was made. This had to be in I guess the mid 2015. Right? It was actually I think before Trump. So the first time I ever encountered this guy, it was this thing where there was a manipulation taking place, and it was about taking down alternative media, right? And it was about taking down legacy media. And now Gary Tan and the network state, along with Balaji, they have this concept of parallel media.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that they use as an example of parallel media is Twitter, right? In fact, Gary Tan actually, there's a video circulating where Gary Tan points to Twitter as the parallel media to all the so-called legacy medias. And so when Elon Musk took over Twitter and turned it into a right-wing platform, right? He turned it into like an 8chan or a 4chan, which is essentially what it is. And he became so emboldened that now he just goes along with white supremacist, fascist memes and ideologies, and he doesn't have any problems openly embracing them now.
Yeah, anti-trans. Right? Yeah, definitely anti-trans.
Anti-trans, anti-black, anti-woman.
Dog whistles. Right? I've seen some real blatant dog whistles from Elon Musk. Yeah.
And so when Gary Tan says that the parallel media is this fascist network, right, that can easily be manipulated, as we're seeing Elon Musk do. He's easily manipulating this. He said he's not going to get rid of it. He said he's going to get rid of all the bots, when in fact he just redirected the bots toward his ideology.
Right.
And so when I start looking at what the network state actually is, a perfect example, Chris Larson, millionaire VC guy, when he gave money to London Breed to support an increased police presence in San Francisco, he highlighted George Floyd. He said that the police reforms that happened after the George Floyd incident, and after Chauvin was actually found guilty, which is so rare for a police officer, he said he wanted to reverse that, and that was one of the reasons why he gave her money. Okay, another parallel media thing that happened was Pirate Wires. And Pirate Wires, I just learned this week. Pirate Wires actually was founded as a result of the George Floyd protests.
Wait, Power Wires?
Oh,
Pirate Wires.
Okay, yeah, the phone is a little bit fuzzy, but yeah, okay, Pirate Wires.
I'm doing the best I can. My computer didn't work, so I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's fine. It's not your fault. Just keep on going.
Pirate Wires is another example that Balaji uses as an example of parallel media. And what they've done is they have actually, and like I said, this was founded because the person who founded Pirate Wires actually had a response to the George Floyd protests. So a lot of this is tied into the rise of the resistance, in particular the black resistance and black and brown resistance that's taking place to their machinations. Right. Yeah. So Pirate Wires right now, as we speak, are on an assault mission against our black and brown council members, Carol Fife, and also a lot of our activists who are also black and brown women, including what's her name? I really wish I could.
Cat Brooks.
Not Cat Brooks. The woman who's running for Congress.
Javanka Beckles.
Not Javanka Beckles, the other one. Her name will come to me. She's a wonderful woman. Yeah. But the thing is, they're actually targeting black and brown women who are in positions of power.
Yeah. Okay, so hold on. So the Pirate Wires and this other outlet were actually reactionary media outlets after the protests after George Floyd was killed, correct?
Well, after Derek Chauvin was jailed.
Right. Oh, okay. Then that's when people got really upset. Okay.
Yeah.
So Balaji has a thing where he actually wants to use the police force as military might. So that means he's working towards the same immunity that Trump is working toward.
Right. So they're aligned in that way. Mm-hmm. Hey,
Well,
you know
a lot
what?
of
We're gonna have
people
to take, guys. We're gonna have to take a quick break because of the FCC and our underwriters need their time. I'm so thankful we have 2 new underwriters for this show. You're listening to Moment of Truth with Ami Chien Mills on KSQD 89.5, 89.7, 90.7 FM throughout the whole Monterey Bay Area and California Central Coast.
KSQD thanks GPI Builders for supporting this program. GPI Builders is a locally owned and operated full-service construction company with more than 10 years of experience and expertise. GPI Builders specializes in home additions, ADUs, and residential remodels throughout the Bay Area. For more information, 1-800-916-8343 or gpibuilders.com. Thank you, GPI Builders, for supporting community radio, K-Squid.
I am childless. I have cats. I am the biggest nightmare of this JD Vance. I am a lady who loves her pets. They are good for taking care of all the rats. I am woman. This is cat. We are an item and together we are brats. Get out your notebook. We have a quote. In November, we are all going to vote. Childless cat lady, I am running the whole country. Childless cat lady, meow meow. Watch out, JD. Childless cat lady, we are running the whole country. Childless cat lady, you better watch your back, JD.
That was Alina Bach from her TikTok video with the song I'm assuming is called Childless Cat Lady, and that refers to what's now become a very famous sentence by J.D. Vance that the country is run by childless cat ladies like AOC and Kamala Harris. And there's this certain, I mean, as a woman, what I feel a lot from these sort of tech bros, and I've gotten comments on my own TikTok account about this from others, is they quote unquote hate women. Like now it's interesting. Teal is gay. Okay. Mm-hmm. Teal has a gay partner or husband. Mm-hmm. And I think that the thing about the, what was the name of that media outlet that you were talking
Gawker.
about?
That's why.
Yeah, that's why he tried to take down Gawker. Go ahead.
Because they outed him. And that is, I mean, honestly, that is something controversial. Like, and I mean, if he is donating to anti-gay causes, there is some justification there, but it truly should be up to the person if they want to be out or not, or at least that's how I feel. But that led to not only him, taking down Gawker and basically setting up a plan, a strategy for other people to take down news publications. This is exactly what Musk is doing right now with Media Matters. He's suing them and basically dragging out the suit just to suck away all the money he can from Media Matters because he didn't like their coverage.
Yeah.
And on that same note too, going back to kind of this separate, which Scott summed up so well about their separate publications, the separate news cycle. I mean, they truly, it's very 1984,
Well,
we make the news. And a big part of that kind of started back during the pandemic and the lockdown and those first recalls when Jason Calacanis, who is one of the people on the All In podcast with David Sachs, a San Francisco conservative who literally hosted a DeSantis fundraiser at his house.
Mm-hmm. And I think he was on that launch of DeSantis with on Twitter with Elon Musk, correct?
Yes. Yeah. And he also just spoke at the RNC.
Right.
And basically was laughed at. He was pretty embarrassing. But then, or at least no one, it was like talking through the entire thing. But so now Calacanis, who's also another successful techie, he paid this journalist, Susan Dyer Reynolds, to basically write a hit piece on Boudin. And was very open about it, throwing down this money, like $70,000 or something to that effect, to just to write a hit piece. And that's exactly what she did. It was a very,
it was definitely kind of more anecdotal than anything. It was like one more case where basically probably shouldn't have let the guy out, but Boudin did for whatever reason. But that set them up. That kind of kicked it off. And then from there, they're kind of setting up their own parallel media. And so now you have people like Michael Moritz, who just started the SF Standard. Now, at least they're kind of writing. They're trying to be in the center, but they definitely have their opinion pieces that are very skewed. And then on top of that, too, there's a new one that Susan Dyer Reynolds writes for called The Voices of San Francisco.
Okay.
But the thing is, too, what's so funny is they've already captured the legacy media in the area.
Hang on one second. Before we go to legacy media, I just want to note that Peter Thiel is one of the founders of Seasteading, which we talked about on a past show. And so when we say that Balaji, for example, is crazy, well, actually Peter Thiel, who has a huge influence on our politics, as we've said, has proposed, these ideas of we need to start our own countries, outside of the realm of the countries that are governed by our current governments and run by and funded by our tax dollars. And they've actually tried to go for things like the Solano Project, California Forever, right? To create sort of these company towns. I mean, it gets very weird,
Yes.
And this is what I almost feel like in the legacy media, when you bring up legacy media, it's like somehow I think that the legacy media, and I am going to include our own city here, Santa Cruz, California, has a hard time grappling with or grokking the weirdness of some people and how much power they have. Because it's like, if I report on this, I will look crazy, right? And so let's go to D. Scott. D. Scott, do you have any thoughts about that? And besides, I just want to throw it, I'm sorry, but it's important to me that Thiel has talked about democracy being antithetical to freedom. And
right. There's a lot of things that are going on here that are actually international.
Yeah.
Right now, what's happening with the network state is they're trying to do the very same thing in parts of Africa, in parts of South America. We're also seeing the influence seeping into Argentina with Milio, and also people pushing back in the UK, people pushing back in Paris, because this thing has been an organized right-wing takeover of the entire planet. This is not just localized.
So when you say network state, can you explain that? I mean, I explained a little bit about Peter Thiel, but that's a Balaji public, that's online, right? The network state. It's
that's the thing that's so insane about it. That's the reason why it's so hard to explain, right? Because what you can do is the only way you can really explain it is in retrospect, right? After the attempt is done, then you get it. If you look at what happened in 2016 in the UK, as simultaneously taking place in Brazil, simultaneously taking place here, and all of these things are connected to either Trump or Le Pen or
Bannon.
Boris Johnson. Yeah, but the thing is, this is happening all over the planet simultaneously. There was an attempted right-wing takeover of the entire world in 2016. They tried it in Germany. They tried it in Paris. They tried it in America. They tried it in South America. They tried it in they actually did try to take over everything. And so it's not until we actually can be able to make the connection between, say, okay, perfect example. There used to be a time when there used to be these black guys who used to always play, old black men, who used to play chess over on Post 1 in downtown San Francisco. Powell Street.
Yeah. And
they had a whole bunch of tables set up there just to play chess.
Yeah, I remember.
Right? And in a lot of ways, they used to keep the peace there. The guys wouldn't cut up in front of the old men, right? They'd have to go someplace else. And so in a lot of ways, it kept the peace. But it made the newly transplanted tech bros extremely uncomfortable. And so London Breed got rid of them.
Wow.
Right? And so, but in doing so, it showed their power. It showed how much power they had to transform the culture of the city. Right? And so this is what they're doing in Oakland right now, but it's really hard to get your head around until you look at it backwards. How did Boris Johnson do that? Right?
Yeah.
How did Le Pen do that? How did Trump do that? Then we start looking at Russian influence, and you come off starting looking crazy. But the truth is, if you actually look backwards for it instead of trying to predict it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I think the thing that I really love about Kevin's work is that he doesn't try to predict it. What he's showing is the pattern.
Right. Well,
Right.
and then you look back at Cambridge Analytica, you can read the Mueller report and you'll find all, that the Russians were influencing social media, particularly targeting black communities, trying to, and all this is really happening. And even some
it's
leftists.
Really happening. I mean,
yeah.
you don't really have to, you don't have to be a predictive person to actually talk about things that are actually documented as fact.
Right.
Yeah, it's not a conspiracy. I mean, they're literally even just pointing out that the boxer, was she Hungarian? The one that everyone accused of being a man, actually.
Right.
I mean, they're now saying that's
directly from Russia.
Yeah.
And the same thing, Marjorie Taylor Greene speaks in almost entirely Russian talking points.
Yeah.
Almost entirely. And so what we're looking at is when we look at the network state, when we look at somebody like David Sachs, right? And we look at somebody like Peter Thiel, what we're talking about is what they're openly saying and doing. The same thing's true with Project 2025. This is not a conspiracy because they actually published a 900-plus document that we all read. And so it is this thing about, it is about being able to see things in hindsight. And then being able to at least try to figure out ways to cut them off at the pass, because it's not like they're not trying to show us what they intend to do. And so, I mean, to me, what the network state actually represents is, well, I just saw recently a video Peter Thiel said is actually the failing of liberalism, right? He said the liberalism is failing.
Wow.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
But what is liberalism? Liberalism is equal rights for women, equal rights for the marginalized. Mm-hmm. It's a human rights issue.
And he's also said that the women's suffrage, the women's right to vote, is an obstacle to true libertarianism. And he's walked that back to say, well, I don't mean to take away anyone's vote. Of course he's going to say, I don't mean to take away anyone's right to vote.
Of course.
Right, but then you have Republicans who are saying that they want to take away the women's right. You have Christian nationalists saying that,
Yeah, exactly. And so that's how Project 2025 falls into the purview. Like Emily Mills just recently shared, they're going to have a conference. Jerry Tan's going to be there. Peter Thiel has actually helped pay for it. Chris Larson has helped pay for it. Sachs has helped pay for it. And they have speakers there who are going to be from Project 2025.
Is this the Reboot conference?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah. We've been following from Santta Cruz. We might be the only people down here following so closely. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, but to me, though, I mean, the thing that's actually at the core of it is it's like the appeal to a certain kind of racial animus and gender animus. And they really do believe that the American people are more like them than they are like us.
Right. Yeah,
right.
It definitely feels so exclusive.
They appeal to misogyny. They appeal to homophobia. They appeal to transphobia. They appeal to anti-blackness. They appeal to anti-immigration. They appeal to these things. I personally believe they believe any of that. I think all they're doing is looking for is power, right?
Mm-hmm. And money.
Because Balaji, he doesn't break things down into black and white. And I'm going to step back and then I'll let Kevin speak more. But the other thing is that we have to also talk about the white ethno-state.
Okay.
And what comprises the white ethno-state? It's not just white people, okay? It's Aryans, okay? It's Aryan. And what is an Aryan? Aryan can also be a South Asian person, right?
Oh.
And one of the things that we're seeing right now with J.D. Vance's choice of his wife is that American white nationalism does not understand the Aryan nation globally. Right? So what we're seeing a lot of people who don't understand why J.D. Vance's wife is South Asian, right? And they're calling her a brown. And they're saying he's...
Right, now let's be clear. These are MAGA folks and white supremacists within the MAGA movement who are upset that J.D. Vance's wife is South Indian and South brown.
Indian.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so my thing is that what I'm seeing happening in that particular context is that the Bay Area has already lost the thread as far as the network state is concerned. Balaji is not welcome into their crowd. Jerry Tan will not be welcome to their crowd. Diane Yap, only through extreme hatred, is welcome into their crowd. Right? So I think
into whose crowd? Into the Aryan Nation crowd? Or I'm confused.
White supremacists.
Okay.
White supremacists.
Oh, Gary Tan is not allowed because Gary Tan is Asian.
Yes.
And Balaji is Indian.
Yes.
Got it. Oh, I see. So there's going to be some conflicts here.
constant conflict, because the thing is, your understanding of the Aryan Nation is this Google-oriented Aryan Nation. It's this San Francisco-oriented Aryan Nation.
Oh.
And you think you can embrace all these things that are actually coming from Project 2025,
Wow.
and then you can use that to bring people into your thing. But to me, what I'm seeing is I'm seeing that they just totally underestimated the white supremacy that is American white supremacy.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So maybe that thing worked with Chessa. Maybe that thing worked. As it turns out, Diane Yap was an anti-black person, and she helped with the recall, got rid of Allie Collins. But when you start talking about places like Oakland, we are the most diverse metropolitan city in the country, right? So it's going to be really hard to convince everybody to grab onto, I'm black and now I'm anti-Asian, or I'm white and now I'm anti-black,
Right?
Or I'm middle class and now I'm anti-poor, or I'm housed and now I'm anti-homeless.
Yeah.
That might work in other places, but I don't think it's really going to extend very far. But I do believe that's what the intent is. I think the intent is to divide and conquer, in order to have the American government legitimize crypto so they can make tons of money. I think that's really what it's all about.
Okay, I gotta stop because I've got to give out ID numbers for KSQD. You're listening to KSQD 90.7, 89.7, 89.5 FM in the central coast of California and the Monterey Bay. We're speaking with two reporters who go back a long way in the San Francisco Bay Area who've been tracking the rise of the tech bro billionaires and vulture capitalists who have now really weighed in on San Francisco politics to the point of recalling a district attorney and recalling 3 school board members. Here's the thing. So people think it sounds crazy. I remember I listened to an NPR story about Allie Collins and the school board members who were recalled, and I thought, oh well, that makes sense. I mean, what were they doing working on changing names when we're in this, pandemic and so forth? And that was sort of how NPR reported it, right? Yep. So let's talk about the media a little bit, but I also want to say that I had to talk to Allie to figure out. Wait a second, she has her side of the story, and we are not hearing it. Yeah. We are not hearing how it was actually the former school board who decided to change the names of the schools. And it wasn't, this was right after the George Floyd killings. People were supposed to be doing stuff, and so anyway, let's talk about the media. I want to talk about also our particular city because we have a very strong YIMBY movement, right? And I would say that in general, in the establishment, in our establishment media here, the idea of YIMBY seems very reasonable. It's like, okay, yes, we do have a housing crisis. We have people who can't live here. But of course, there are many ways to solve a housing crisis. If we had rent control, right, then I don't think this, you heard me talk about this apartment complex that is like one of the lowest income, stable, downtown, pedestrian, walkable, friendly complexes we have. These people are going to get kicked out of their homes now. Some of them have been living there for decades, They really rely, and then they're going out into a community where the housing prices are now, it's for a studio apartment, $3,000, and so I guess what I'm trying to say is even though some of these ideas sound crazy, Emily Mills and you all have been tracking the funding, the Phoenix Papers, which you did a whole podcast about, are people who actually went into the dark money funding of these campaigns. And so I feel like the news media isn't doing a good enough job of saying who's funding and what do they want, So could you speak about that and also the YIMBY, how is YIMBY being used in this situation?
Well, so, the people behind YIMBY, let's just be clear, it's AstroTurf. They put on a great, as I call it, faux-gressive, FAUX-gressive, face on it because it's all about density, will stop climate change, going more transit oriented. That's going to be climate, that'll help decrease emissions and stuff.
Right. And housing the unhoused, supposedly.
And housing
right?
the unhoused. But the YIMBY movement started 2015. And actually, at the time when it was first getting coverage from Toshio from San Francisco, when he was covering for outlets like In These Times and Truth Out, there was 61,000 empty units in San Francisco. There was really not a housing crisis. What there was a rent level crisis. And it had already pushed out basically the majority of artists in San Francisco. You know, the people that made San Francisco cool.
Yeah.
You know, the people that actually came up with Burning Man and stuff like that. The artists, yeah, they're all gone. They're all pushed out because of high rents and stuff. And a lot, but so, all right, that would make sense. If you build more, hopefully prices will come down, but that we have not seen that. You can go through San Francisco and see over and over again brand new apartment buildings with half, maybe a third of those units filled.
Wow.
And if you go on the website and you look at it, they're all $3,000 for a one bedroom, $2,500 for a studio. So of course people can't afford that.
Right.
But it's actually good business for these landlords to keep them empty because they can just hold out and wait for somebody who can rent it.
And now they have these algorithms at this RealPage company.
Yes,
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, but I was just going to say, but because though too, what's at the core of this is that real estate is an amazing business. It's actually pretty much our biggest business.
Right.
They found in 2021, $217 trillion are in business globally. But still, in America alone, real estate, foreign investment in real estate is $54 billion. So these are massive, not necessarily industries, but investment worlds. And so much of it, too, is everyone caring about their properties, which is why you see like an increased push for police. Because what are police really? The protectors of property, you know? They're the ones, after the George Floyd riots, you know, people are like, oh, I hope this stops, you know, police brutality. But on the other end, you go, look what they did to our buildings.
Right. Well, you know, I mean, so I want to tell you, like, when people from YIMBY, we have YIMBY Action, YIMBY Law, and the person who's the policy director for both of those lives here, served on the homelessness committee with me. And when I hear people talk, it's like they really seem sincere, you know, like we want to build housing for people. It's a housing crisis. I guess where I get suspicious is when you have people like Nolan Gray at California YIMBY writing for the Manhattan Institute all the time. And Manhattan Institute signed on to the Grants Pass decision to criminalize the unhoused. So
yeah,
it's like strange bedfellows. Yes, go ahead.
Oh, I just want to make one note, too. A great example of kind of this YIMBY hypocrisy. It just happened in Berkeley. Now, Berkeley, they just are going to push through an upzoning ordinance that will basically create more missing middle, as they call it. So not your big skyscrapers and not single family homes, but your smaller apartments with like 3 to 4 units, you know?
Right.
And so they want to build it over. So, hey, you know, not too much resistance to it, except for one spot, the Hills. Now, if you know anything about the Berkeley Hills, it has been it's like kindling. It's basically just a wildfire waiting to happen.
Right.
You talk to any wildfire expert and they will tell you it's not about if, it's when a wildfire is going to rip through, just like what it did in Oakland in 1981. Same kind of thing. And the problem is that they haven't been upkeeping the roads or anything like that. So it's these tiny roads. So fire trucks have issues getting out. And there's a lot of houses out there. I remember that's actually back in the late 90s, early aughts. That was the real estate boom in Berkeley.
Yeah.
So they have this ordinance and they say, okay, we are going to open up this, you know, to missing middle housing all throughout except the Hills. And the YIMBYs hated it. The YIMBYs were angry and they ignored. They didn't care that the fire chief literally wrote a 17-page report talking about how the making dense living in the Hills would make it extremely more dangerous and probably increase the amount of deaths that would happen. Does not matter. What matters is upzoning, the removal of zoning regulations. People should be able to build wherever because it's not actually about housing. It's about product.
Yeah. I did want to mention all the media outlets that have sprung up, or even the Twitter accounts like Emily Mills, not related to me. But go ahead. And I just want to make sure we have time. We've got 5 minutes left.
Okay, well, I just want to say very quickly the one thing that, that's never discussed is subsidized housing.
Yeah.
Yep. They're against it. That and rent control. They're against it.
So to me, I think the thing that's really most important is that, we have this guy, Chris Moore. He's a part of our Oakland recall. He ran for city council. He lost he had 4% of the vote. And he just recently agreed to a tweet that said that what the main goal is to keep black and brown people from renting in places that are predominantly white.
Wow.
He actually went along with that. He agreed. This guy named Steve Heimoff.
Okay.
Okay. Well, anyway, but yes, how it's coded as black and brown is a really big deal.
We need another hour with you all for sure, and we'll have to have you back on another time. I did want to mention Emily Mills. She was just called out by Marina Times as like being insane. She should be in an insane asylum for doing the research and the reporting that she is doing on her own without pay, from what I understand.
And do you know who Marina Times is?
You were
previously mentioned Susan Dyer Reynolds.
Was she mentioned on this show? Because now I'm okay. Okay, so this is not a news outlet. I don't know what it is. The Marina Times, and then also, so Mission Local seems like a good outlet. You've got 48 Hills, which is Tim Redmond of the Bay Guardian, and your podcast, which is
great guy.
Yeah, and your podcast again, which is called
Doomloop Dispatch,
and Sad Francisco, which was the title for the show. And I did also want to mention, because I think we left it out, that J.D. Vance worked for Peter Thiel. That's how that connection happened. J.D. Vance came here and worked for Peter Thiel in the Bay Area, and that's how they got connected. And it's interesting to me because I don't think Thiel likes Trump. And so I wonder, if that's already creating. Go ahead, yeah.
Thiel was the one who actually arranged the meeting for Vance to meet Trump.
Yeah. And
also was the guy that funded him to get a whole series of jobs in the tech industry.
Yeah.
But I don't know exactly what that connection is. But Thiel is actually the main benefactor of J.D. Vance throughout his entire career.
Yeah. Okay. Welcome to Talk of the Bay on Wednesday, August 7th. This is a special program produced by the Moment of Truth with Ami Chien Mills team. Our show today, Sad Francisco, how the tech bros behind J.D. Vance and Donald Trump are attempting a Bay Area and national coup. And this is part 2. We had so much to talk about. We ran out of time last Monday. So our show is about these tech bros and bazillionaires supporting J.D. Vance. They also happen to support the YIMBY movement in San Francisco. And what do they want from San Francisco? What do they possibly want from cities like ours in Santa Cruz, California? Maybe your city could be a blue city somewhere in the United States. And what do they want from the nation in supporting J.D. Vance and Donald Trump? Kevin L. Jones is a multimedia journalist and audio producer who's worked at some of the most notable news outlets in the Bay Area, including the San Francisco Chronicle, KQED, and KTVU for 2 decades now. He currently hosts the leftist news show and podcast Doomloop Dispatch with D. Scott Miller. Welcome, Kevin.
Hey there, Doomloopers out there.
No, here they're Talk of the Bayers. But
Talk of the Bayers.
But they could become Doomloopers any day now that they know about your podcast. D. Scott Miller is the former managing editor of the East Bay Express, former associate editor of Oakland Magazine and Alameda Magazine, columnist in residence at San Francisco Museum of Modern Art's Open Space, advisory board member of Nocturne's Journal of Literary Arts, and regular contributor to several newspapers, websites, and magazines. Miller is the founder of the Afro-Surreal Arts Movement through his publication of the Afro-Surreal Manifesto in the San Francisco Bay Guardian in, May 20th, 2009. Welcome, D. Scott.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Jones and Miller have been tracking the rise to power of high-tech and venture capital executives in San Francisco and the greater Bay Area, and how they are using their billions to shift the dial on Bay Area politics. With the pick of J.D. Vance, an acolyte of Peter Thiel, who founded PayPal and Palantir, as vice president for Donald Trump, We all need to know what these tech execs are about and what they want for the Bay Area and the nation. So welcome, guys. We're going to lay out some background for folks. Is that going to be okay with you?
Sounds great.
That's fantastic.
Okay, great. So first of all, I want to introduce you to our particular city, and I'm going to introduce it because I think it's like maybe a lot of other blue cities across the country. We have a pretty strong YIMBY movement here. We have what people are calling a housing crisis, and I personally have been, I ran for office at one point, and I was knocking on doors and talking to people who really feel like they cannot afford to live here. We have a lot of people living on the streets who are actually working. We have students who live in their cars and in RVs on campus. Actually, the UC Santta Cruz system just shut down like their RV parking site where they were living. And so we have a lot going on, also a lot of pressures around the housing issue and a lot of pressure from developers who want to change the zoning laws and so forth, or the regulations around development here to build more housing. And that's very similar to what happened, I believe, in San Francisco. And so let's talk about that. I'm not saying it's the same. I don't want to say it's the same. I think it's different. But I am seeing some echoes, I think, of what happened in San Francisco. And I'm just going to share with you, too, so that you know where I come from, that I was living in San Francisco in the late 90s, the second half of the 1990s, when the tech boom was just kind of rolling, right? And my mother worked at Cisco. Carlos Santana played at their, office party, for their holiday office party. There was so much excess, and there was so much money. And I was writing for Metro at the time, Metro newspapers, and I wrote for them an article about the reverse commute, because what was just starting to happen was it used to be that people lived in the suburbs and commuted to the city to go to work. And then what started happening was that people actually tech employees wanted to live in the city. So they were buying homes in the city and apartments and condos, and they were then driving to get down to Google and to Apple and to Facebook and et cetera, right? Do you guys remember that?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, so that, I think, was sort of the starting time of when tech really started to hit San Francisco, outside of like Silicon Valley. And so I guess what we didn't get to cover on our last show, and we covered a lot of this about, people have to go back and listen to the last show, is how these tech executives have sort of taken over San Francisco. But actually, let's hear it again from you two. Like, let's start with start with Scott this time, in terms of what you've seen in terms of this history and how tech executives start to take more political power.
I reached back a little bit further than most people. I started noticing the tech expansion in probably like 2008, 2009.
Okay.
San Francisco used to be a city that was really reliant on its tourist revenue. In fact, a lot of the revenue that San Francisco got was from the tourist board, San Francisco Tourist Board. And then tech started moving in. We're talking about like the first boom.
You're talking about 2000. Well, I was there in the 1990s, so that's what.
Oh yeah, that's the first boom. But
okay.
I started noticing that the face of the city actually started changing right around 2007, 2008.
Okay.
I gave a couple of examples of this. Like you were saying, I think a lot of it has to do with that people no longer wanted to live in the suburbs and commute to the city. Instead, they wanted to turn the city into the suburbs.
Right.
And so, the first things I've noticed, there was a time where there were a whole lot of senior black men who used to meet every day and play checkers on Powell Street Station, at the BART Powell Street Station.
Right.
And a few of the new residents started to complain about those men who had been there for 20 years. Yeah. Right? And the next thing you know, they're gone. Now, other people have probably complained about other things, but I started being curious about who has enough influence to just take something that's pretty much an institution that kind of indicates the multicultural presence of a city, and all they have to do is just go to the city hall and say we don't like this, and then it just changes, right? So that was really where I started connecting the dots. That tech money was really starting to have a major influence on the way the city itself functioned. And then slowly but surely, we've started giving tax breaks, and this is we're talking about under Ed Lee, right? And the whole thing was he started giving major tax breaks to the tech industry, but in lieu of that, He did that in a way that stopped really relying on the tourist revenue. So we stopped becoming a tourist city. And so a lot of the things that we saw happening, but were cultural institutions that were actually subsidized by the city in order to be a tourist city, stopped being subsidized. And so in a lot of ways, what we see in San Francisco now is this kind of, especially in downtown San Francisco, it's an empty place. And I know that COVID had something to do with that. Of course, a lot of people are working from home and things like that now. But there used to be cultural institutions downtown.
Yeah.
There used to be galleries. There used to be movie theaters. There were actual cultural institutions that people could, interact with, even if it was going to be under, like, say, a social distancing thing. So it still should have existed. And so that was when I really started noticing that tech was really starting to influence the city in a negative way. And I didn't really start seeing them actually getting involved in politics until very recently, though. But they seem to have understanding that they need to stay behind the scenes.
Right. There was this guy, Ron Conway, who was a major supporter of Ed Lee. Who was Ron Conway? And he was also a mentor to Gary Tan, who has become much more visible, is really all over the place now. Yeah. Both, I believe, in tech. But who was Ron Conway? Do either of you know? Kevin, do you know?
Yeah, he was a VC. He was a venture capitalist.
Okay.
He's one of Silicon Valley's super angels, which is just gross. But anyways, he invested in things like Google, Napster, PayPal, and then but he actually got into San Francisco real estate and really started throwing his weight around, including his money. But yeah, pushing for Lee, pushing for the Twitter tax break. And honestly, he's still this kind of face that lingers, he's still around, but he's not as prominent as, say, somebody like Gary Tan now, who's really kind of taken the media by storm. But he's still out there, actually. He, just before David Talbot had his stroke, David Talbot, writer of Season of the Witch, book I recommend to everyone. But he he basically had a debate with Ron Conway at some highfalutin elitist club in the city.
Wait, the artist did, or Ron Conway? Oh, the artist had a debate with Gary Tan.
Not Gary Tan, Ron Conway.
With Ron Conway, okay.
David Talbot, who started Salon.
Okay. Okay.
And he wrote the book Season of the Witch, which is a fantastic history of San Francisco that really kind of focuses on the left. I hear there's some issues with some of its factual reporting, but it's still really great, especially gives a lot of credit to Vincent Hallinan. But yeah, Ron Conway, just this guy involved like all the time. His fingers are in everything because he's got so much invested in real estate there.
And what was that debate about? What was it like?
Well, Ron Conway is one of these guys that pushes the narrative that progressives have messed up San Francisco.
Yeah, that's a big narrative.
All the problems we're facing now are because of the progressives who, by the way, have never been in power. Have never been in power in San Francisco. Never. They have never, ever. I mean, you've had guys that kind of leaned progressive, maybe a little leftist, but anyone that was full on progressive has basically was fenced in and kept away, and pushed out after a while too. Chris Daly, a great example, all the guys that were willing to kind of fight for the little guy, they either were shuttered away or pushed out, especially through just the frustration of politics in San Francisco. So when you see this on the internet all the time, everyone's saying like all the problems right now we're facing are because of progressive stuff, including they always try to say that defunding the police, we let these progressives in and they defunded the police. Who defunded the police? What city has defunded the police? Right. They try to accuse Oakland of doing that now. Never happened. Definitely not San Francisco. San Francisco actually pays per capita for their cops the most in the nation. I mean, and especially when you get a 5.8% clearance rate in crimes, you are not getting your investment. That's for sure.
What does that mean, Okay, we're going to have to take a station break, but tell me what a 5.8% clearance rate means real quick.
Crime solved.
Oh, okay.
Honestly, crime solved. That's what it is.
Gotcha. All right. So this is Ami Chien Mills with Moment of Truth doing a special Talk of the Bay with two Bay Area journalists who've been tracking the rise of tech executives who made their money and made their millions and billions in Silicon Valley and San Francisco, and how they are impacting that city now, and how they may be about to impact the whole United States because they're backing J.D. Vance and Donald Trump. We have a little clip that I think it's very important to play. I'm going to just introduce it and set it up. This man's name is Balaji Srinivasan, and he has a podcast, and he has written this whole document called The Network State. It's kind of like the Project 2025 for like these tech bros. And people think he's crazy, but he's actually very connected to Gary Tan and Peter Thiel and a lot of these other folks. So let's listen to what Balaji Srinivasan's philosophy for San Francisco and the rest of the world is.
Once you have a San Francisco health dashboard, which is % of the city controlled by gray, that is actually something that you can put up publicly, and every individual gray subtribe, the pirate wires and the Tandlers and the Tans and the this and that, can all optimize for that. All the people in San Francisco who are also, the other thing is, there's like 10 tech companies that come out of this for tribal organization, right? Obviously, there's a mobile social network, there's a crowdfunding of real estate, there is the merchandise and so on, and the badges and the stuff. That's actually kind of cool to wear those shirts and to be part of a group, right? So there's a lot of different things. It could be one company, it could be several. So there's a lot of things that go with our strength of setting up companies, building technology, and so on to organize. It's community organization in a certain sense, right? So you have the map. And by the way, gray doesn't need to like start in one corner and take the whole thing. You can have turf that's gray turf, okay? The big thing about this is if you've got gray turf and you've got enough gray police, you have gray control. Basically, what is the inverse of them taking down Elon's sign but not caring about a broken window? The inverse of that is gray being able to fence off territory where only gray-approved people can enter. Now, by the way, you can do this in a building. Within a building, you can do this. Like you go to the old Twitter HQ, and you can't even go up the elevator unless you've got, or sometimes you can't get into the building without a key card, right? Being able to fence off blocks is important if it's possible. Right? At least start with fencing off buildings. You want gray controlled territory.
So gray controlled territory, that is Balaji Srinivasan's idea for San Francisco, that tech people, tech bros, and I guess their household staff and a lot of police officers apparently, which they will have banquets for, right? Will control whole parts of San Francisco. I wonder, Scott, could you talk about his influence on other folks like Gary Tan, like Peter Thiel? I actually I got so confused that I made what people call, I think they call it a murder board, but that's a bad name, a crazy board, where you've got people's faces on a wall with, like red yarn connecting them. And I've got a paper with all these people. But yeah, could you help explain how Balaji Srinivasan is connected to these other folks and why this is something that we need to be concerned about?
My entry into this whole thing was actually due to Oakland recalls and how they were connected to these people. And a woman named Ami Mills, who is a great researcher, she's the one who turned me on to Balaji and the Network State, and how it's connected to Gary Tan and how that's connected to people like Elon Musk. And the Network State itself is a thing where let's say Musk and Gary Tan and Y Combinator and Balaji and Peter Thiel. And
and Y Combinator is Gary Tan's venture capital.
He's a CEO.
Startup.
He's not the owner. He's the CEO.
Okay, he's like, it's a startup incubator, is what he says.
Yeah, incubator. Yeah.
They do Uber Eats and stuff like that. DoorDash. Yeah. But the thing is that they are all interconnected, and they all have pretty much the same agenda. And that agenda is not just restricted to San Francisco. It's not just restricted to America. They are already trying to start these network states. They tried to do it once in Solano, California. They just failed doing that just now.
They bought up some acres. They bought 60,000 acres in Solano.
Yeah, they did. But the residents there pretty much voted them out, which is great. And then they're trying to do the same thing at Alamo Square Park. I suspected they were really interested, particularly Elon Musk was interested in West Oakland, but they're also doing it in places like in cities in Africa. They're trying to establish these things in Nigeria. They're trying to establish these things in South America. These kind of like startup cities.
Yeah, and also there's this Solaris Society that's trying to do I guess that's the city campus at Alamo Square, where they want it to all be kind of tech people.
Exactly.
And then also I was reading about, like, they had a meeting in New York where they were trying to do some kind of a city in the Mediterranean. I don't know if you guys, maybe that was in one of the Mission Local articles or the New Republic article by Gil Duran. Like, they were trying to recruit people to be a part of this new nation. It was called like tech Zionism as well.
Yeah, but but I think the thing that's really important to remember is, like, if we take a look at what happened in 2016 all across the globe, there was a fascist takeover of almost all of the
Hungary,
established Western
Poland, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but also I'm also talking about Boris Johnson. I'm also talking about Marie Le Pen. I'm also talking about Donald Trump.
Yeah.
and Bolsonaro in Brazil. Yeah. Right. So this is just what I call it is it's a rebrand of that same system. Mm-hmm. Right. That's all this really is. It's the same billionaires with the same intent. And they just decided they were going to rebrand it in a way to try to make it more palatable to the general public. But if you take a look at, say, for example, Gary Tan just finished having a conference, and in the conference he had speakers from Project 2025. So the whole thing is actually this interconnected network of right-wing influence. And so the connection that I see is that Balaji and Tan and Teal and Vance, they all know each other. They all come from the same place. They all go to the same parties. And they are what Balaji calls the Greys, right? And the Greys, the elites. But the Greys themselves, they might as well call themselves Reds. Right, because that's how Balaji breaks up the whole country and the whole world. There are right-wing people he calls Reds. There are left-wing people he calls Blues, and he calls himself and his people the Grays. But all of their policies and everything they intend to do still has a very much a fascist intention, still very much right-wing intention behind it. It's almost the exact same strategy that was implemented in 2016, including the implementation of Project 2025.
Well, it was interesting, his logic. Hang on to that thought, I want to hear it. But his logic about, well, they made us take down the Twitter sign because it was like a safety problem, and Musk did not follow the rules in putting up the X sign, right? He said the inverse of that, or the converse of that, is that we actually we create walled cities. I'm like, okay, that doesn't that's like, that's quite a leap, from the city, not like it. But just,
not really when you think that the ultimate thing that they want to do is actually self-segregation.
Right.
They want to segregate.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And they want to establish segregated cities all over the world. And these cities will, just like if you take a look at the faces of the current tech industry, and you see this lack of black and brown faces, well, they're just going to create cities that do the same thing.
Yes.
And so that's really what the honest to God intent is. And I've said this before, but I'm catching up on a lot of things. But there is an anti-blackness that's underlying in almost all of these intentions.
Yeah.
So the one I talk about most is David Sachs, who calls himself a moderate, but hosted Ron DeSantis and also hosted Donald Trump in San Francisco.
And they all call themselves moderates, which is crazy.
Yes, which is crazy because all their intentions are definitely right wing. So David Sachs in the 90s wrote a book with Peter Thiel called The Diversity Myth. Mm-hmm. We have another. 96, and it was called the diversity myth. It actually was attacking affirmative action and saying diversity was not a strength, that we should not be diverse.
Yeah.
And Peter Thiel actually has embraced certain elements of Nazism, and he really has no issue with saying that he has.
Yeah.
The same thing is true with Chris Larson, another millionaire who contributed to San Francisco to enforce police presence, and he said the reason why he was motivated by that was because of what happened with police reform after George Floyd's murder. So even there's an anti-blackness. He thought that black people had gotten too much, and so he wanted to do something to try to fix that and get the police to once again enforce racist policies. Yeah. And the same thing is also true with I just learned about this one. There's a right-wing what the network state tried calling themselves doing was they're going to create parallel cultures, parallel communities, and parallel publications, what they call parallel media.
Right.
And Gary Tan used Twitter as, he said, this is our first success at creating a parallel media. Right. But as it turns out, Elon Musk, too, is a white supremacist. Yep. So that's the reason why we're having to deal with a Twitter that is really rife with Nazis and right-wing talking points and white supremacy.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to, we all have a lot to say. I just want to share that for people who are listening, the relevance here is that Peter Thiel was the one, along with probably Musk and others, who got J.D. Vance the VP nomination with Donald Trump, and has supported J.D. Vance in his senatorial race in Ohio, and started venture funds with J.D. Vance when J.D. Vance moved to San Francisco, right? Yep. And their fund, the venture capital fund that they set up, I'm forgetting the name of it. It's like Nyara or something. They're all from Lord of the Rings. All the names are from Lord of the Rings.
Yep.
But I mean, they're funding like this social media company. I believe it's called Rumble. Which is full of Nazi propaganda and dog whistles and white supremacy and misogyny.
And Russell Brand, for some reason.
And Russell Brand has lost his mind, apparently. Russell Brand has become a born-again Christian who is now hanging out with Donald Trump Jr. Smoking cigars. I am like, what is going on? This world is turning upside down. Now, here's the thing I want to share, though, because people can listen to all this and think, this is crazy. How is this relevant to actual politics? These people are out of their minds. But here we have Gary Tan, and he seems to be sort of like a connector here, right? Because he's a public face. He's poured millions of dollars into local elections. He has supported the YIMBY movement and YIMBY candidates, as far as I know. He's a big YIMBY supporter. He's funded Sonia Trauss and her organizations, whatever they may be. Is that right? Am I getting this all right?
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
And, what I know of it, yes.
Yeah, and he also speaks with Balaji Srinivasan on these conferences and podcasts and in the network state conference. I think he helped to create, right? So how is he any more moderate if he's hanging out with all these people? So let's talk about Gary Tan for a minute. Let's go to Kevin for a second.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, yeah. I mean, basically, yeah. I mean, that's it. Well, it's the shifting of the Overton window. I mean, even you would consider like leftists here in America would basically be like your run-of-the-mill liberals in Europe, Yeah. But they're constantly shifting it. And because they've captured the media, they can basically, portray themselves as being moderate, especially they use that lovely phrase, common sense. Oh, we're just talking common sense, Oh, wait, crime is going up. But, so common sense would be to increase the police presence. That'll solve everything. When does it ever?
Right. Although I have to say the crime rate has gone down, and I want us to address that after the half-hour break. But go ahead, keep going.
Oh, well, that's an amazing point, too, because, crime is down. Even after the pandemic, there's a bit of a rise, which they exploited. Like after, that helped kind of the Boudin recall.
Yeah,
in
the
San
pandemic
Francisco.
Created a lot of crime. And economic downturns always do, to be honest.
Yeah, well, it was like this weird bounce back because there wasn't crime because no one was outside or anything.
Oh,
and then it kind of came back. It kind of had its little bounce, which almost should have been expected, And and that was the worst part too, is they kept comparing crime data to the time of the pandemic, to the lockdown, whenever no one was out. Of course, there was no crime. No one could be out. And then they're like, well, look how bad it's gotten now. And it's like, well, if you compare it to rates before the lockdown, it's actually great. It's like pretty normal or decreased. But this is exploiting the media narrative to get what they want. I mean, the one thing you're hearing more and more now, too, from the Gary Tans and stuff and their little minions is, well, the data says it's down, but it sure doesn't feel like it. It sure doesn't feel like crime is down.
They're saying that now that crime is down, they still don't think that crime is down. So that they want to keep this narrative going. That's interesting.
Yes, and they use data science scientists, such as Oakland has Tim Gardner, who has been in Oakland for 15 years, did not show up until this past year when they started getting the recalls going. And now he's supposed to be this white knight coming down, breaking down. This is what actually the police data shows. And he doesn't really back up his claims.
Okay, but let me explain something. So Oakland is also now experiencing these sort of billionaire, millionaire guys. There's one guy who's funded, I think, 70% of the recall campaigns.
Philip Dreyfus.
And who is, okay.
80%.
80%. We're going to get to that in a second. We have to take our half-hour break. You are listening to Talk of the Bay on KSQD. With the Moment of Truth team, we are doing a part 2 on San Francisco because it is so important. And San Francisco is now, these tech bros are now influencing national politics through the figures of Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. We will be right back after these messages.
If we can build here, we're going to take over the whole country. We're going to take over every nation in the world. That's what is starting tonight here among all of you.
So scary.
That was Balaji Srinivasan, who is
Gary Tan. That was Gary Tan.
That was Gary Tan? Oh, I thought, oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, then that just proves the point that Gary Tan, who says he's moderate, who people say is a quote unquote Democrat, is also very caught up with all of these quote unquote grays who want to make their own cities outside of the cities that the rest of us live in and keep the rest of us out. I want to just share something. Someone texted in about the name Naria, which is the hedge fund that J.D. Vance and Peter Thiel started together. It's actually based in Ohio. Naria, if you just rearrange a couple letters, guess what that spells? You guys can guess?
Exactly.
Yeah, you just say it, Scott.
Aryan.
I mean, and this is something that, like, again, I'm like, this is so crazy. And this is what happened when Donald Trump was elected, where I was like, okay, wait a second. Is he dog whistling here? And he was, like the 88s and the 14s. These are all numbers that mean things to Nazis and white supremacists. And these guys are doing it all the time. And so I guess what I want to do is try to bring in some local relevance too, because we're in Santa Cruz, California. It's considered a very liberal city. We also have more and more tech money coming in. We have our tech billionaires. There's the guy who started Joby Aviation, and people are like, oh, but he's a hometown guy. He's got billions of dollars now in stocks. The city just handed him $500,000 in like some kind of aid to help get jobs over here, which I'm like, okay, that's like a penny to this guy. It's like a fraction of a penny to this guy. And we have billionaires across the county who are starting to weigh in on our elections, put money in along with the real estate industry and YIMBY. And we've had recalls of progressive people. Now, I'm not going to, and that came from a lot of outside real estate money. This was before, I really understood there wasn't a YIMBY movement, right? So I guess what I want you guys to talk about, because here we do, I mean, I know that I feel like we need housing. Okay, we need all kinds of housing. And also, of course, there are some developers who want to develop just like expensive housing. We just have I guess what I'm wondering is that not legitimate? Is that not a legitimate concern? Go ahead.
Well, yes, but what's not being pushed or embraced by YIMBYs is things like rent control and vacancy taxes. Right. Because honestly, if you probably get into it and you look around Santa Cruz, there's probably already a lot of empty units. Honestly, there's in all these cities where you have big YIMBY movements, you actually do have empty units, but you have no way to get them to the landlords to lower their rents.
To fill them. They just want to keep them vacant until they can get the rent that they're seeking. Because then they kind of get locked into that rent for a little while. Yeah.
Exactly. And so that's why they just push, just build more and the rents will go down because people will want to fill it. Well, that's not been happening at all. And as a matter of fact, and
in
sadly,
San Francisco, it's not happening in San Francisco.
San Francisco, not in Berkeley. You're still looking at studio apartments for $2,600 and above, one bedrooms for over $3,000 a month. And there's a lot, like in Berkeley alone. It's like you'll see on Zillow about 1,400 empty units, but they're all extremely expensive. And then you actually go to the buildings themselves, and there's even more.
Okay, so now I just want to say that yes, I'll let you go in a second, but I just want to add that our YIMBY did support the empty homes tax. It wasn't super full-throated, right? I mean, the tendency is to just say build, 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 and then the candidates that they're supporting are not supporting the empty homes tax, right? But I think one passed in San Francisco, one passed in Oakland, and so you have these more progressive cities that are more diverse. We're very white down here. Yeah. Who have passed these progressive policies, and that's probably also part of the pushback. I want to also invite listeners to call in at 831-900-5773, 831-900-5773. You can email us your question or comment at onair@ksqd.org. Okay, you guys, go ahead.
Oh, and real quick, Scott, let me just say, the problem, though, with the San Francisco vacancy tax is that they're not enforcing it. Basically, landlords are just ignoring it. So,
yeah, I wanted to just point out that the Sad Francisco podcast, just this week, 4 hours ago, as a matter of fact, they started talking about this thing called permanent supportive housing.
Yeah.
And that's, I think that in a lot of ways what the YIMBY does, and in fact, I think a lot of this is just noise to drown out honest solutions to these problems.
Yeah.
There are honest solutions to the crime problems, honest solutions to the homeless problems, and one of those is like things like subsidized housing and permanent supportive housing. Yes, and I really do recommend that people check out the podcast this week from San Francisco.
Sad Francisco, we're stealing the title. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So and to me, I think that a lot of these things are they're like distractions. It's like smoke and mirrors actually distract us away from real solutions. Yeah. One of the things that drives me crazy is here you are investing all of this money in order to try to influence San Francisco politics, but that very same money could actually be going towards helping people in San Francisco.
Right. But I do want to say that Conway, I think his argument, was it Conway or someone else, one of the folks who was supporting the tax on tech companies to provide homelessness services, where they were sort of fed up and saying this is not working. We do have a caller, and hold that thought if you want to respond to that, because I do want to try to make sure that we're being covering all the angles here. Caller, are you there?
Yeah.
Great. Who is this?
I'm Bill.
Hi, Bill. Do you have a question or a comment for our two reporters?
Comment.
Go for it.
So, hear me out. I've lived here for more than 40 years. Moved from a place that was dying because of overpopulation, ruining the place and expecting all that cool infrastructure like outdoor cafes and not doing any real work. And I've seen the changes since the earthquake, and those are interesting. It took 5 years for downtown to revive, and the theater's what opened it back.
You're talking about Santa Cruz. You live in Santa Cruz.
Santa Cruz,
California, folks, if you're not familiar.
California,
okay, go ahead.
So the only ones, I see all these ugly Stalinistic edifices going up, and there's no architects involved. Just anybody can put that together. I'm exaggerating to make my point.
Yeah.
The only ones who can live here will be the ones who are dot-comers, who can, at 24 years old, coming straight out of college, can design a bunch of video games for a bunch of Game Boys, who are the only one, and they'll be great for perfect for directing drones, bomb-laden drones in faraway countries. That's what gamers are trained to do. And they're the only ones who can afford here will be the ones who've designed video games, and they have to clog the freeways going in their single-passenger vehicle over the hill every morning from 4:30 to 7:30 and back in the afternoon. And that's a sad comment on what has evolved in Santa Cruz. No longer can look at 30 miles of buffer. The buffer is going.
And thank you so much. And we're going to just move forward with your comment and see if our two Bay Area journalists want to comment on that or other things that we've been talking about a lot.
I feel your pain. That's it.
Well, I want to say, I know tech employees. I know people who work for Google. They're not mean people. They're not terrible either. They're not like they're not like Balaji Srinivasan. They don't believe that stuff. They're normal people, and they have to work, and they're working, and they're making a living for their families, right? So, so where do we kind of say, well, we can't have so many tech workers, or do you understand what I'm saying? And there is another caller, so go ahead and answer that, and we'll get to the caller next.
I would say that it's not the issue like with the tech workers, though. There is a concerted movement to kind of bring them into that network state.
Yes, there is.
Basically, there's like, they've been very open with the fact that they set up a lot of social events to basically kind of indoctrinate them into this. Especially, they're attracting people from out of town, so they're coming in. They don't have their social circles yet. They don't have their friends, and so it's very easy for them to bring them into to the network stakes, this elitist idea, especially, hey, you know what you're doing. You're super smart. That's why you're rich and you're here. And look at these stupid ideas. Like, should the smart people be in charge? That's why, and it's a very easy message to sell.
It's very much about some kind of superior attitude, and then also all this money that brings political power. Let's go to our next caller. Caller, you are on the air. What's your name?
Hi, I am Ian.
Hi, Ian.
Hi. Thank you so much. This is a really important program. So before I make my comment, had anyone, I don't remember the name of the movie, but there was a movie not too long ago, a sci-fi dystopian movie where the population of poor people, there was only poor people. It was a neo-feudalist society. They lived on a devastated earth, and the rich people built cities in the sky.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yes,
well, yeah. This is neo-feudal. This is what they've got planned for us, these fascists.
Yeah.
So I'd like to use this topic to make my pet peeve point on how we can stop this. The only way we're going to stop this is by voting in Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
And,
we have to. Yeah.
To those third-party progressives and all hardline progressives that said, well, Biden, we're not going to vote for Biden because of his Mideast policy. Of course, Trump is going to be better, right? So why make it worse, So I don't know if they've changed their minds with Harris and Walz, but they've lost their minds because what's going to, America's ripe for a fascist takeover. This is what these people want. So instead of the left-wing politics of cutting off your nose and spite your face, the politics of if we can't have everything we want, we don't want anything.
Right. You know what? Okay, so thank you so much, sir. I forgot your name. What was your name again?
Ian,
thank you so much, Ian. We're going to continue to comment. I just want to say something about sort of where capitalism is taking us, right? Like the system is set up now so that people with power and money can take over politics. And we're seeing that in this very left city of San Francisco, where these literal like fascists who call themselves like a whole different breed of people, calling themselves grays, are like, we don't want you in our city anymore. That's insane. And so
it's been a long time coming, though.
Okay, all right. So let's talk about, well, first of all, you're listening to KSQD, 89.5, 89.7, 90.7 FM. We do have another caller, but go ahead, Scott, and share what you were going to say about that.
Well, if you take a look at London Breed, for example.
London Breed, the mayor of San Francisco.
The mayor of San Francisco. London Breed calls herself a moderate, too.
Right, I know.
But
or even also, progressive. She said, wait, I'm progressive.
But so and the thing is, like, especially in California, you're not going to win elections if you call yourself a Republican. You're just not, right? And so, like in a lot of ways, what they're doing when they call themselves a moderate, but it's not what you say; it's what you do. So if you're giving homeless people buses out of town and sweeping the streets and taking and assisting the Supreme Court decision to do that all over the country. I personally see that as you being a right-wing person.
And that's Mayor London Breed, who signed on to the Grants Pass case, as did our governor, Gavin Newsom.
Yes, exactly.
And actually one of our council members who used to be registered as a Republican Renee Golder actually is one of the people who is supporting that Supreme Court decision, to be honest.
Yeah.
And we've had, like I say, we've had recalls here too that have been supported by a lot of money. We do have another caller. Go ahead, caller. Are you on the air? Go ahead. Yes.
Eileen in Santa Cruz. I've lived and loved here since 1969, and it was the horrible rent started going up and up and up and up in the 80s. Fortunately, I have pseudo-socialistic housing by HUD and HA, thankfully. But I just need to make the remark that I really think that real estate and insurance companies are the real power whores of capitalism. I think you're a great host, and keep on keeping on, and I just don't, just the economics are just horrible.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you so much, Allie.
Thank you.
Thanks for calling. So I know that everyone has a lot to say. I'm going to just bring in a couple more topics because I think they're important. I did look into the hedge fund that, not hedge fund, but what is it called? The venture capital fund that Peter Thiel, our new vice presidential nominee, and
or JD Vance, you mean?
I'm sorry. Sorry, I'm getting them confused.
Same thing, though.
Maybe the same thing, right? Thank you so much. JD Vance and Peter Thiel set up together, right? And I was looking at some of their funding, and some of it's going to this company that is called. I have a note here. The company, it's NARA, is the name of the venture capital firm, and they're investing in all these private equity firms, we've done a private equity show, which was horrifying to hear about what private equity is doing to our economy, to our companies in the United States. And this company called Strive, which has been putting out, they wrote a letter to Boeing that I found on LinkedIn, which is 5 pages long, about how DEI was the problem at Boeing, and DEI was creating these safety concerns. To put it bluntly, they say Boeing's fixation on diversity, equity, and inclusion has replaced engineering quality and safety as core company values. And so this is what we're seeing, these attacks on diversity, these attacks on inclusion. We've seen Elon Musk tweeting out 8814, that whole Noah's Ark thing that I think I was telling Scott about, where he had a spaceship going out into space where the world was overpopulated and there were armed guards around the spaceship, and who was not allowed on the spaceship? These hordes and hordes. Hordes is not the right word. All these black people, okay?
Well, and like I said, I think that one of the reasons why anti-blackness is one of the driving forces is because one of the things is this hubris and arrogance that comes from these people that makes them believe that they understand the mind of Americans.
Yes.
And so in their mind, they believe that all they have to do is this really traditional dog whistle. They try to Willie Horton everything.
Yeah.
So the anti-blackness is supposed to pull white America into their program.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And that is just because of the arrogance. They are making the assumption that because they are white supremacists or they are Aryans, that all other white people are going to go along with that concept. And so, of course, the thing you do is that you blame the minority, right? You blame the minority, and then that way you get people to go along with your decision. Now, we learned later on that Boeing, in fact, what happened was that they were actually cutting corners in order to pay off their CEOs.
Yep.
That's what we learned. And so, and the same thing also happened on a smaller scale when Walgreens and Safeway, they were saying that this gigantic crime wave, which is supposedly perpetuated by black people, was the thing that was causing all these places to close down, when in fact it was things like lawsuits from wage theft and price gouging that was actually causing all the closures.
And but also just the drop in brick and mortar sales too.
Yeah, and the drop in brick and mortar sales. But they're making the assumption that because most Americans are racist, most Americans are white supremacists, most Americans are anti-black. If we just frame everything in this thing, then most Americans are going to go along with our decisions.
Yeah, I think. Go on.
Yeah, and I think it's a terrible miscalculation. You don't get Barack Obama from a country that does that. You don't get a Kamala Harris from a country that does that. But that is exactly what their strategy was from the start. And we're seeing how it manifests now that Harris is on the campaign trail, and she's bringing out crowds that actually just drown out Trump's crowds, even going all the way back to 2016.
Yeah.
But
So
yeah,
they-
it's
it was
very
terrible miscalculation.
Yeah, and it's very similar. It's the Civil War again. It's basically the rich slave owners going like, "Oh, we don't like this. Well, let's make the we'll split them off. We'll get the lower classes to support us by pushing racism. When really the rich are only thinking about their bottom line."
But in San Francisco, it feels like the dynamic is we're going to have all these people who work for tech companies who actually have more income and who are like, we don't want to deal with the unhoused. We don't want to see the unhoused. We don't want them in our presence. And why should we have them in our presence when we have all this money, right? We could do something else. That's a little bit of a different dynamic. I wanted to talk for a minute about Heather Knight, because when I was in San Francisco, Heather Knight was the journalist that was covering education. She wasn't like a super big deal in San Francisco. Now, all of a sudden, she's writing puff pieces about Gary Tan for the New York Times. Let's see, who wants to? Kevin, do you want to talk about that and talk about legacy media and how they're dealing with all of this? Because it sounds like they're really not.
Yes. Well, Heather Knight, I would say, is absolutely the reason why I will not write for the San Francisco Chronicle anymore.
Does she still write for the Chronicle?
No, she's gone on to be the San Francisco bureau chief for the New York Times.
Gotcha.
And while she's doing, the Gary Tan puff pieces, she's also still doing hit pieces as well, about rental crisis and that kind of thing. But she basically made a name for herself by being the queen of the hit piece. We used to call her Heather Hit Night, or, Heather Hit Piece Night, because like literally how she made her bones was she did that terrible hit piece about Allison Collins.
Oh, no.
The San Francisco.
Yeah,
that truly started the end of it.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
she was the San Francisco school board member, black woman, amongst 3 school board members recalled by this consortium of folks that we're talking about.
Yes, and truly, it was a hit piece, basically supported stuff from Diane Yap, who was from the Manhattan Institute. Just threw that in, no problem, while also kind of blaming her things that weren't really necessarily her fault. And then the worst part was a hit piece. She did 2 big ones about Boudin, but one was also kind of scripted as like a puff piece about Brooke Jenkins, who is now the San Francisco district attorney, who basically used to work under Chesa Boudin when he is DA, kind of turned her back on him, took a bunch of money from a nonprofit, and then ran the recall campaign and became the recalls candidate. Anyway, so it came out. Oh, can I just say it real quick?
Yeah, but
we're
we're getting to the top of the hour, so I'm going to have to interrupt you in a second, or just do it quickly.
Okay.
Yeah, you've got like a
Real
minute.
quick.
You got a minute.
Real quick, basically, she wrote about a case that was and totally mischaracterized it. The actual public defender came out and called out Heather Knight for lying in her piece in the Chronicle, and the Chronicle didn't do anything. Nothing. There was and she was totally caught red-handed lying in her hit piece.
Okay, and I just want to mention that Maylene Obinata did a Moment of Truth interview with Malcolm Harris, who is the author of Palo Alto, who talks about how Stanford and this whole Silicon Valley area was a hotbed for eugenics, like decades and decades ago at the beginning of HP and IBM. And I think that this goes way back in the tech world, this sort of racist, white supremacist. And part of me is like, oh, I don't want to believe it's true. But then when I look into it, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's really true. I want to thank the 2 of you for all of your work on this issue. You can find both of these guys, Kevin L. Jones. Thank you so much.
Anytime. Appreciate it.
And Scott Miller, thank you so much.